Hey everyone, ready for a deep dive into happiness? We're talking about everything, definitions, science, philosophy, even how different cultures view it.
Yeah, happiness, right. It's something we all kind of understand, but trying to actually define it, that gets surprisingly tricky.
It really does.
Yeah.
Like we know it when we feel it, but explaining it is a whole other challenge.
Well, there's no one single definition everyone agrees on, but when you look at the ideas that come up again and again, it's about well-being,
Mhm.
contentment, flourishing.
So it's not just a fleeting thing, right? It's more like a state of being.
Exactly. And this is where the two main types of happiness come in.
Two types.
Yep. Hedonic and eudaimonic happiness.
Those are some big words. Break it down for us.
Sure. So hedonic happiness, that's all about pleasure. Think indulging in a delicious meal, listening to your favorite music. It's those moments of pure enjoyment, actively seeking out those good experiences. And actually, this idea has been around for ages, like all the way back to Aristippus, this Greek philosopher who basically said, pleasure is the ultimate good thing.
So hedonic happiness is the pleasure seeker, always on the lookout for good times. Okay, what about this eudaimonic happiness? That sounds a bit deeper.
You're right. It's about living a life that's aligned with your values. Personal growth, contributing to something bigger than yourself. It's about meaning and purpose. Like imagine volunteering for a cause you really care about, or having a career that actually uses your talents to make a difference. And this was a big idea for Aristotle, another Greek philosopher who was all about virtue and living a fulfilling life.
So feeling good is part of it, but it's also about doing good and being good.
Totally. It's about feeling fulfilled, knowing you're living in a way that's true to you.
I can see how both types are important. But let's get into the science for a minute. Our sources talk about brain chemistry and happiness.
Hmm.
Are there, like, actual chemicals responsible for those happy feelings?
Oh, absolutely. Positive psychology has found that certain neurotransmitters, think of them as happiness chemicals, play a key role in how we experience happiness.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting. Tell me more about these happiness chemicals.
So first up is dopamine, often called the reward chemical because it's tied to motivation, pleasure, and that sense of satisfaction you get when you achieve goals. It's what drives us to seek rewards.
So that feeling of pride after you finish a tough project or, like, hit a new personal best at the gym, that's dopamine at work.
Exactly. Then you have serotonin, which is often called the mood stabilizer. It helps regulate our emotions, contributes to feeling good and calm. Actually, low levels of serotonin are linked to depression and anxiety.
So keeping our serotonin balanced is key for a good mood. What's the last happy brain chemical?
The last one, that's oxytocin. It's often called the love hormone. It gets released during social bonding activities like hugging. It makes you feel connected, trusting. It helps strengthen relationships.
So a good hug can boost our happiness chemicals. I can get behind that. But there's more to the science than just these chemicals, right? Our sources talk about this PERMA model.
Yes. PERMA is a model of well-being developed by Martin Seligman, a big name in positive psychology. He proposed that well-being, and by extension happiness, is made up of 5 elements. And lucky for us, they spell out PERMA.
Okay, let's break down PERMA. What does P stand for?
P is for positive emotions. Pretty straightforward. It's experiencing those feel-good emotions. Joy, gratitude, love, contentment, all that good stuff.
Makes sense. What about E?
E stands for engagement. It's about being fully absorbed in something, like challenged and fulfilled. Reaching that flow state. Being so into what you're doing, you lose track of time.
Yeah, that flow state sounds pretty awesome. What's
Yeah.
next?
R is for relationships, emphasizing how important it is to have those meaningful connections with other people. Humans, we're social creatures. Good relationships are so important for our well-being.
Couldn't agree more. Good relationships are a must. What about M?
M is for meaning. This one's about having a purpose in life. Something that goes beyond just yourself. Could be through your work, relationships, hobbies, whatever. It's about feeling like your life matters, that it makes a difference.
Finding meaning is powerful stuff. So you've got PERM. What that A in PERMA stand for?
A is for accomplishments. This one's all about setting goals and, actually achieving them. Feeling that sense of mastery, like you're competent. Doesn't have to be about winning awards or anything. Could be personal victories, big or small, as long as they give you that feeling of satisfaction, like
Okay.
you're making progress.
So PERMA says it's not just one thing that makes us happy, right? It's this whole mix of positive emotions, engagement, relationships, meaning, achievement. It's a more holistic view.
That's it. PERMA is a framework to help understand how all these different parts of our lives contribute to how happy and fulfilled we feel.
This PERMA model is making me rethink my own ideas about happiness already. But let's switch gears a bit. Our sources talk about how culture can impact how we understand happiness. How do different cultures around the world approach this idea?
That's a great question. Culture really shapes our view of happiness, like how we go after it, how we experience it. It can be really different.
Give us some examples. How does this play out in different parts of the world?
Let's compare Western and Eastern ways of looking at it. In a lot of Western cultures, like especially in the US, happiness is often linked to individual achievement, freedom, and material success.
Right, like a whole American dream idea. Work hard, achieve your goals. That's how you find happiness.
Exactly. Now compare that with many Eastern philosophies. Happiness, there's often more about inner peace, harmony, and not being attached to material stuff. For instance, Buddhism is all about ending suffering through mindfulness and enlightenment. And Hinduism talks about Ananda, which is like the state of pure joy you achieve through spiritual growth.
So it seems like in the West, it's more about what you do and achieve,
Yeah.
while in the East, it's more about your inner state and spiritual practices.
You got it. But beyond those bigger philosophical differences, different cultures have all sorts of interesting practices that give us unique perspectives on happiness. Have you ever heard of the Danish idea of hygge?
Hig, yeah, it rings a bell. I think I saw it on those cozy blankets and candles they sell everywhere.
That's pretty much it. Hygge is all about creating this atmosphere of coziness, comfort, and being together, enjoying simple pleasures with loved ones. Think a candlelit dinner with friends, or snuggling up with a good book on a cold night.
That sounds so lovely, especially as the weather gets colder. What other examples are there?
Well, in Japan, there's this concept of ikigai, which translates roughly to a person's reason for being. It's like finding the sweet spot where your passion, mission, what you're good at, and what the world needs all come together. Finding work that really resonates with who you are.
So it's not just about having any job. It's about finding work that gives you a sense of purpose.
Exactly. And circling back to the East, Ananda, in Indian traditions, it's more than just like everyday happiness. It's about this transcendent joy, almost a bliss, often linked to a spiritual awakening, feeling at one with the universe. It's about connecting to something way bigger than yourself.
Wow, so many different ways to think about happiness. It's amazing how culture shapes it all. But I do have a question.
Sure.
Our sources make a distinction between happiness and pleasure. Are they basically the same thing?
It's a good point. And yeah, people mix them up all the time. While happiness and pleasure often overlap, they're not identical. Pleasure is usually short-lived, tied to your senses. That yummy dessert, a fun shopping spree, a hilarious movie. Happiness, though, it tends to last longer, and it's connected to meaning and fulfillment.
So pleasure is fleeting, and happiness is more of a lasting state.
Exactly. And there's a concept in psychology that explains why pleasure alone doesn't guarantee lasting happiness. The hedonic treadmill.
Okay, hedonic treadmill. Sounds intriguing and maybe a little bit scary. What's that about?
Basically, we humans are super good at adapting to positive changes. We might feel super happy when we finally reach a goal or buy that thing we've been wanting. But after a while, we get used to it, and our happiness level goes back to normal. So we're always looking for the next good thing, chasing that next hit of pleasure.
So it's like we're putting in all this effort, but not really getting anywhere in terms of lasting happiness.
Perfect analogy, and it just goes to show why simply going after pleasure or trying to get more and more stuff won't actually make you happy in the long run. You gotta look beyond those temporary good feelings.
This is really eye-opening. It makes you think twice about all those messages we get, like, buy this and you'll be happy, or achieve that and you'll be happy. Are there any other common misconceptions about happiness?
Definitely. One biggie is believing that your happiness depends entirely on what happens around you, on your external circumstances.
Oh, the if only trap. If only I had this or that, then I'd be happy. I think we've all been there.
Totally. But research shows that only about 10% of our happiness comes from external factors. The rest is down to our genes and, more importantly, our mindset. How we choose to see and react to the world around us.
So even winning the lottery or getting your dream job won't automatically make you happy forever?
That's right. And another misconception is that success equals happiness. We hear about all these super successful people who, on paper, have it all, but they're still unhappy. Turns out it often works the other way around. Happiness can actually fuel success.
Wait, hold on. You're saying being happy can actually make you more successful?
Yeah. When you're happy, you tend to be more optimistic, motivated, resilient. You're better at problem solving, you think more creatively, and you're more likely to take risks that can lead to good things happening. All that can help you succeed in different areas of your life.
So instead of chasing success to be happy, Maybe we should be focusing on being happy to achieve success. That's a big shift in thinking.
It is, and it's empowering because it means we have some control over our own happiness. We can
Yeah.
work towards it, not just wait around hoping it'll happen.
This is amazing. We've covered so much ground definitions, brain chemicals, cultural views, and now these happiness myths. It feels like we're peeling back the layers of this whole complex idea of happiness. But let's get practical here. What are some things we can actually do to bring more happiness into our lives, especially when things are tough?
Great question. There's a lot of solid research on strategies we can use in our daily lives. One that's really powerful is practicing gratitude.
Gratitude practices, okay? What does that actually look like?
It's all about making time to regularly think about and appreciate the good stuff in your life. Could be as simple as keeping a gratitude journal where you write down a few things you're thankful for every day, or telling someone directly how much you appreciate them.
And how does that boost happiness? Just thinking about good things.
Well, research shows that when you practice gratitude, it helps shift your focus from what you don't have to what you do have. You start to see the good stuff more, and that can make you feel more content.
That makes sense. What other strategies can we try?
Mindfulness and meditation are really helpful too. These practices help you become more aware of your thoughts, feelings, and what's happening in your body right now without judging yourself. And this awareness can help you manage your emotions better, reduce stress, and feel calmer even when things are chaotic. And that can make a big difference in your overall happiness.
So mindfulness is about being in the present moment and accepting things as they are, instead of getting caught up in worries and negative thoughts.
Exactly. And there are so many ways to practice mindfulness. You can try formal meditation techniques, focus on your breath, or even just really pay attention to what you're experiencing during everyday things like eating or walking.
Great stuff. What other tools are out there?
Doing acts of kindness can have a huge impact on your happiness, like volunteering your time, helping someone out, or even just doing something nice for a stranger.
Why does helping others make us feel happier?
Well, a few reasons. First, it connects you with other people, which, like we talked about, is crucial for feeling good. Second, it gives you a sense of purpose, that you're making a positive difference. And third, it can trigger those feel-good brain chemicals like dopamine and oxytocin, which gives your mood an extra boost.
That's incredible. Something as simple as helping someone can have such a big impact. It's a win-win. But before we wrap this section up, our sources mention some philosophical perspectives on happiness. Can we touch on that?
Definitely. Philosophers have been thinking about happiness for centuries, and their ideas can be really insightful. Let's start with Aristotle, who we talked about earlier. He believed true happiness, what he called eudaimonia, comes from living a virtuous life, a life that aligns with your values and contributes to the greater good.
So it's not just about feeling good. It's about living a good life, one that's in line with your morals and makes a positive impact.
Exactly. And then you have Epicurus, another Greek philosopher who had a more simple approach. He thought the key to happiness was finding pleasure in simple things and having strong friendships.
So enjoying the little things and cherishing those close connections, that makes a lot of sense. Any other philosophers we should know about?
We can't forget Nietzsche. He had a different take on things. He suggested that facing challenges, even struggles, gives life meaning, even if it doesn't always feel happy in the traditional sense.
Interesting. So it's not about avoiding hard things, but about seeing them as chances to grow and find meaning.
That's right. Nietzsche wasn't a fan of the idea that happiness is all about comfort and ease. He thought real growth and strength came from pushing your limits and overcoming obstacles.
That's a powerful perspective. It makes you think about challenges in a whole new light. But before we get too deep into philosophy, our sources mention something called the Harvard Study of Adult Development. What can you tell us about that?
Oh, that's a classic. It's one of the longest-running studies ever done. For over 80 years, researchers have been following hundreds of men, tracking their physical health, careers, relationships, and of course, their levels of happiness.
8 years. That's incredible. What did they find out? What were some of the biggest takeaways?
Well, one of the most important things they learned was that the biggest predictor of happiness and health wasn't wealth, fame, or success at work. It was the quality of a person's relationships.
So those connections we have with family, friends, our community, those matter most.
Seems like it. The study found that people with strong, supportive relationships tended to be happier, healthier, and even live longer than people who were more isolated.
This is really highlighting how important it is to prioritize those connections, to nurture our relationships and build a sense of community. But as we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I'm really curious about this idea of the paradox of happiness. We talked about how sometimes trying too hard to be happy can actually work against you, But our sources also suggest there's kind of a flip side to that. Sometimes happiness just like finds you when you least expect it.
That's a really interesting point. It speaks to how mysterious and, yeah, unpredictable happiness can be. It's often when we're lost in something we're passionate about, working on a project that means something to us, or really connecting with other people, that happiness surprises us. Those moments of flow, purpose, and genuine connection, that's when we often feel most alive and fulfilled.
So maybe it's not about striving for happiness, but about setting the stage for it.
I think so. It's about nurturing those inner qualities like mindfulness, gratitude, resilience, a sense of purpose, and at the same time, doing things and building relationships that bring you joy, meaning, and connection. It's about effort, but also acceptance.
This has been such an insightful conversation. We've covered so much: the science, the philosophy, cultural perspectives, even practical tips. And it feels like we're just scratching the surface of this whole topic of happiness. There's still so much to explore. But for now, we'll pause here, give everyone a chance to process all this. We'll be back for part 2 of our deep dive to go even deeper into this fascinating topic.
Welcome back to our deep dive on happiness. This has been a pretty cool exploration so far.
I agree. In part 1, we talked about a lot, defining happiness, those brain chemicals, cultural ideas about it. But now I'm thinking, how do we actually use all this? What can we do to be happier, especially when life gets hard?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? There's no magic formula, but our sources offer some helpful advice. One big thing is focusing on what we can control. We already talked about how it's a myth that happiness depends only on what happens to us, those external things.
Right. If we can't control everything around us, what should we be focusing on?
Our mindset. How we choose to see and respond to things, that makes a huge difference. And that's where mindfulness and gratitude come in. With mindfulness, you learn to observe your thoughts and feelings without judging them, which helps you stay calmer, even when things are tough. And with gratitude, it's about shifting your focus from what you're missing to what you have. Appreciate the good stuff, you know?
So it's about like training your brain to look for the positive, even when things are going wrong.
It's more about building up that mental strength so you can handle challenges better and finding those moments of joy, even in the middle of difficulty. It's not about pretending bad feelings don't exist. They're part of life. It's about learning to deal with them so they don't take over.
This makes me think of those philosophers we talked about. Aristotle's idea of living a virtuous life, that eudaimonia thing, it seems like it fits with this focus on what we can control. Making choices based on your values, contributing to something bigger than yourself no matter what's happening around you.
Totally. And even Epicurus, the one who is all about simple pleasures and friendship, he highlights finding joy in everyday stuff. It doesn't matter what's going on around you, a cup of tea, a good conversation, a moment of beauty. Those things matter. Finding contentment in the present moment.
I like that. Happiness isn't some far-off goal. It can be right here, right now, in those little moments. But what about Nietzsche? He was the one who said, challenges and struggles give life meaning. How does that fit in with being happy?
That's where it gets really interesting. Nietzsche wants us to rethink our whole relationship with hard times. He says those are the things that make us grow, that push us and help us discover how strong we really are. He thought a life without challenges would be kind of boring, you know, lacking depth.
So it's not about avoiding challenges, but about embracing them, seeing them as opportunities to learn and grow.
Exactly. It might seem counterintuitive, but there's research that shows this is true. People who've gone through tough times often end up more resilient, more grateful, even happier. They develop a deeper appreciation for life and a stronger sense of who they are.
This makes you rethink the idea that happiness is just feeling good all the time. Maybe it's more about accepting the whole experience, the good and the bad, and finding meaning and growth along the way.
I like that way of putting it. It brings us back to that paradox of happiness. When we stop chasing it so hard, when we focus on living a life with meaning and purpose, connecting with others, that's often when happiness shows up.
So it's not about chasing happiness, but about creating the conditions for it to show up.
Yes. It's about working on your mindset, those inner qualities like mindfulness, gratitude, resilience, having a sense of purpose, and also doing things and having relationships that bring you joy, meaning, connection. It's a balance.
This is so empowering. It means we have some say in our own happiness. But before we get too caught up in all this, our sources emphasize how important relationships are. The Harvard study, remember, they found that relationships are the biggest factor in predicting happiness and health. Why is that? Why are those connections so powerful?
Researchers have been looking into that for a long time. There are lots of layers to it. Biologically, when we connect with others, our brains release those good chemicals, oxytocin, dopamine. They help reduce stress, make us feel better, and even strengthen our immune system. Psychologically, strong relationships make us feel like we belong, that we're loved, supported, safe. Those are basic human needs. They help us deal with problems, celebrate the good stuff, and just feel seen and understood. And on a social level, being part of a community gives you purpose. It connects you to something bigger.
So it's not just about having people to hang out with. It's about having those deep, meaningful connections that give you support, make you feel like you belong, even give you a reason to get out of bed in the morning.
You got it. And it's not just romantic relationships, friendships, family, connections you make through your community volunteering, joining a club, even just talking to your neighbors, they all contribute to your well-being.
This reminds me of those cultural things we talked about. Danish Hajj and Japanese Ikigai, they both emphasize connection and community. Hige is about those cozy times with people you care about, while Ikigai often involves finding purpose through work that helps others. Seems like across cultures, people know that we do better when we're connected to something bigger than ourselves.
Absolutely. It's not just cultural traditions either. Positive psychology has a whole area dedicated to studying positive relationships. Researchers have found tons of benefits, more happiness, better mental and physical health, being able to handle stress better, even living longer.
This is powerful stuff. It's a reminder to invest in those connections, nurture your relationships, and make an effort to be part of a community. It's good for you and the people around you. But as we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I want to touch on that paradox of happiness again. We talked about how trying too hard to be happy can backfire, but our sources also mention a flip side. Sometimes happiness finds you when you're not even looking for it.
That's so true. Happiness can be mysterious and unexpected. It often shows up when we're lost in something we love, working on a project that's meaningful, or just really connecting with someone. Those moments of flow, purpose, real connection, that's where we feel most alive and fulfilled, and that's often when happiness pops up.
So maybe it's not about striving for happiness, but about creating a space for it, like setting the stage.
I think you're right. It's about developing those qualities inside yourself, mindfulness, gratitude, resilience, purpose, and at the same time doing things and building relationships that bring you joy and meaning. It's about trying, but also letting go.
This has been such a rich and interesting conversation. We've covered the science, the philosophy, cultural views, practical stuff, and it feels like we've only just scratched the surface of this whole happiness thing. But for now, we'll pause here, give everyone a chance to think about all this. We'll be back for the final part of our deep dive, where we'll wrap things up and talk about some key takeaways and maybe give everyone a challenge to put all this knowledge into action.
Welcome back. We're wrapping up our deep dive into happiness. What a journey it's been, right?
It really has. We've talked about so much, from brain chemistry to ancient wisdom, cultural practices, personal reflections. It's amazing how all these different pieces fit together.
I know, right? And even after spending all this time unpacking happiness, it feels like there's so much more to learn.
Totally. But before we wrap up completely, let's recap some of the key takeaways from this deep dive.
Okay, where do we even begin? There's been so much good stuff. Well, I think a big one is remembering that happiness isn't just a fleeting feeling. It's this whole complex thing, you know? It's about well-being, meaning, purpose, connection. It's not about chasing those temporary highs, but creating a life that has all these elements.
Right. And we learned that happiness isn't just about what happens to us. We actually have a lot more control than we think, thanks to the power of our mindset and the choices we make.
Exactly. Mindfulness and gratitude, those are big ones. They can help us change our perspective, focus on the good, and be more resilient when things get tough. And don't forget those happiness chemicals. Knowing how they work gives us clues on how to boost our mood.
I'm definitely a fan of those brain chemicals. And speaking of things that are on our side, we can't overemphasize how important relationships are. The Harvard study, remember, those folks who've been studying happiness for decades, they found that strong, supportive relationships are the biggest predictor of happiness and health.
It's true. Taking care of those close bonds with family, friends, community, that's essential for our well-being. It gives us that sense of belonging and purpose that's so important for lasting happiness.
Absolutely. Having that support system and feeling connected makes a world of difference. But then remember how we talked about the paradox of happiness? How sometimes focusing too much on being happy can actually make it harder.
Yeah, it's a tricky thing. Sometimes it's when we let go of that constant pursuit of happiness and focus on living a life that has meaning, doing things we love, connecting with others in a genuine way. That's when happiness seems to find us. It's like it comes naturally from those experiences.
Like a balance, right?
Yeah.
Between actively trying to cultivate happiness and just kind of surrendering to the journey.
Exactly. It's about creating the right conditions for happiness to grow, working on our mindset, nurturing those meaningful relationships, engaging in things that have purpose, and appreciating the good stuff in our lives.
And those cultural perspectives we talked about, Danish Hajj, Japanese Ikigai, Indian Ananda, they showed us so many different ways to think about happiness and finding meaning in life.
Yeah, those traditions are so rich. They remind us that even though happiness is something we all want, the way we experience and go after it is shaped by our own values, beliefs, and the culture we come from.
This deep dive has been amazing. I'm sure our listeners have a lot to think about and reflect on. But before we go, do you have any final thoughts or a challenge for our listeners?
We talk about the paradox of happiness and how chasing it directly can sometimes backfire. So maybe a better question to ask is not, how can I be happy? But what gives my life meaning? Exploring that question and then doing something about what we find might lead us to happiness in ways we never expected.